All right, sports fans, how's everybody out there doing? William Martin coming at you one more time here on YouTube with another edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast. And on this edition of the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge Podcast, I have the privilege of being joined by Mark Jenkins. Might be having some more company before we get done this evening, but nonetheless, we are going to get this party started. Mark, how are you doing?
Doing great. Well, thanks for having me as always, man. Pleasure for being here. How's it going, man?
Listen, man, I can't complain one bit. And as always, I'm just like, you know what? Let's tear into this thing and let's get this started because this, I think, is a prominent topic in the world of basketball, especially men's basketball right now. And it needs to be talked about. You know what I mean? And it needs to be talked about a lot. That is the rise of the Achilles injury in the NBA. Okay, because there was once upon a time where an Achilles injury, an Achilles tear in the NBA was a rare thing, but now it's become a regular occurrence. I mean, you just look at the most recent edition of the NBA playoffs. Okay. We saw three All Star players suffer Achilles tears that not only severely hindered their respective teams' chances of winning in the postseason, but it also put things into jeopardy for next season as well. I mean, you look at it, the first round saw Damian Lillard of the Milwaukee Bucks go down. The second round, it was Jason Tatum of the Boston Celtics. And of course, last Sunday night in game 7 of the NBA Finals, it was Tyrese Halliburton of the Indiana Pacers. And in the case of both Lillard and Halliburton, they were already dealing with leg injuries, okay? And they were attempting to play through it. And of course, the rest is history. And, before I flip it over to you, I'm just going to ask one thing. Where did this rise in Achilles injuries come from? I have my theories, and I'll leave it at this. I feel that most of these players are wearing low top sneakers right now. I feel like that's not helping their case. And also, to me, I feel like the current shoe technology is not helping them either because a lot of these companies, okay, across the board, they're going for lighter footwear. In recent years, not the same base for these guys, not the same grip, especially in a game that is much more perimeter oriented than it was 20, 30 years ago. That's just my thoughts. What are your thoughts?
So I got a couple different levels on this theory, and I'm going to start off with just kind of some surface level stuff. And I think a big portion of what's going on has to do with the overusage of these players at an earlier age. So let's think about, when we played sports growing up as kids and, other top athletes that were growing up, as a kid. In that age, they were playing, but they weren't playing to the level of what these kids are playing at now.
Right.
And therefore, I think it's putting their body in more susceptible to these type of injuries. Because if you think about it, these are non-contact injuries. Contact injuries are going to be contact injuries. If somebody, runs against somebody, crashes against somebody, jumping, fall to the ground, that type of stuff, broken bones, dislocations, things like that are going to happen. That's inevitable. But when you have these non-contact injuries, it has a lot to do more with them just constantly doing these motions, almost like second nature. Back then the players were, they were going to practice, playing half speed at practice most of the time and, playing in their games once or twice a week, probably.
Hmm.
Now these kids are playing 2, 3 games in a day, not really practicing, just going full force all the time. So they're putting their bodies in positions that can possibly happen. These non-contact injuries can happen. And I think we're seeing a little bit more of that, trickling down into the NBA, college. We even see it in high school. Dennis, I know you see it, in your line of work. So if you think about it, I think that's a surface level of where this problem is. And
Mhm.
like I said, I'll go into some deeper stuff later on, but that's where I kind of want to kick it off there.
D, man, listen, I'm gonna flip it over to you right now, man, because it's like, this is a topic that, we discussed, by ourselves, and now we're putting it out here in the forefront. Out of the three of us, you're the one with the coaching experience. Okay. So you see this a little bit more hands-on, as far as, kids with the leg injuries, especially the Achilles injuries. And like, where do you think that this increase is coming from?
Um, William, there's a lot of factors in there, and I'm gonna go a place that y'all might not be thinking. I think it's the shoes.
I listen, I just said
I
that just
think the
before you jumped
shoes
on.
that these kids wear nowadays
Hmm.
are not protective enough. They're geared towards being more speed and more explosiveness and freedom of movement, and it's causing you not to have as much stability. So, well, I don't know if y'all know this, but not only am I been coaching 20 years, but I've been working at the hospital of special surgery for the last 10 years almost. So actually this year makes year 8 or 9 there. I'm losing track. I got hired 2016 here. So year 9, August 1st, me there. And my doctor's a team doctor for the New York Rangers, the guy I work for. And you see the you look at the shoes. If we just go back and look at the shoes when a lot more guys started wearing low tops and started wearing these minimal shoes to have the lightest shoe possible on your feet all the time. And look, I'm a victim of it. The minute they came out, I was the first one in line. Like, oh, these are lighter. This is better. Kobe's, they come right to your ankle. You go
Hmm.
back and look how many guys got hurt wearing Kobe's.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, the shoes to me is like, to me, I think the shoes are the culprit. There's a genetic thing that happens with these athletes. So, like guys like Michael Jordan, something I discovered just doing my little due diligence and just over time, the guys that jump really high, they actually have longer Achilles tendons because they have smaller calf muscles. So you see those guys with the really small calves, the Achilles tendon is longer because it has to go up further to attach. And on top of that, these guys are taller.
Right.
I read somewhere that Giannis's Achilles tendon is 13 and a half inches long.
Wow. Wow.
I read that somewhere. Thick. But remember when he was having all those calf strains? Remember. But you know what he did? He sat out. I actually partially tore one of my right Achilles in a touch football game. And I was probably like 35 at the time. And the only thing that made it feel better was rest. Like there's no way around these injuries. So to me, I think it's just a couple of things. I think it's a bit of a genetic thing. These guys have much longer Achilles tendons than most people. And also, the shoes. I think it's the shoes, man. I think it's the shoes 100%. I don't think they're wearing enough protective footwear. The shoes don't do a good enough job. They're more concerned about how it looks. And everybody's got low tops on. Even the bigs wear low tops nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah.
Remember Patrick Ewing sneakers? That was like a
Yeah.
boot
Right.
Listen. I'll take it a
with a
step.
strap.
Listen, I'll take it a step further, man. Rasheed Wallace balled out in Uptowns for his entire career.
Mhm.
You know,
Don't get it twisted. He talked about that in the
Mhm.
podcast, and he said that he had a special orthotics in place inside. He said
He
there's
had
no way he
to.
could have
He
played
Yeah.
had to. He
in
had
the
to.
regular.
He had to. He had to.
Because that's a horrible shoe, man. It's
Yeah.
flat,
Oh
it's
yeah.
heavy.
Yeah.
Ugh.
Nah, but
Yeah.
it's just like even like the high tops, nowadays. I bought a pair of high tops just to work out in. And, I'm not gonna put the company on blast or whatever like that, but I'm like, it's not the same high tops like the way they felt, maybe 15, 20 years ago. Like I'll give you a prime example. About 20 years ago when the 2K4s and the 2K5s came out, those are pretty comfortable to play ball on. Okay. And it was like, you had the high top, you had the security of your ankle, you had a solid base, as an example. These shoes, they lack that nowadays. And it's just like, again, going back to the non-contact injuries, you look at what happened with Halliburton. Halliburton was just trying to make a move and he was done. You know what I'm saying? And it's like basically the same thing with Dame Lillard, earlier in the postseason against the Pacers. So, to your point, Dennis, like we had just like touched on it just before you got on here. That is a big factor. Mark, I'm gonna pass it back over to you, man, and of course, D, you can pick it up too. The conditioning aspect. Do you think that these players have a like? Because Mark, you talked about it as far as like these guys, these kids, and it starts from the high school AAU level, playing multiple games, a day and stuff like that. But where do you think the conditioning factors into this as well?
It's a big factor because, like I said, it's all about, playing these games and they're not really getting the practice time in like how it used to be. In the 80s, 90s, even early 2000s, these kids were practicing a lot more than what they're
Hmm.
doing now. Now their regular, league schedules, then the AAU schedules, and then if they're playing for this tournament and that tournament, it's so demanding
Yeah.
that they don't have an opportunity to actually practice and condition.
Yep.
So instead of practicing and conditioning and running through stuff half speed and really building up, they're running full speed, game speed 100% of the time almost now. And that right there is putting that extra wear and tear on the body. And I agree with you guys with, the sneakers being a portion of what it is with the Achilles, with the materials that they're using, making it lighter, trying to make it, more comfortable, whatever it is that they're trying to do. But I also think it all starts with that fundamental level that these kids are putting so much wear and tear on their body. Now, when they get into the NBA, they're not a 21, 20, 21, 22-year-old kid as far as body wise. They might actually be a 29, 30-year-old body wise with the mileage of competitive athletics that they've put on their body.
That's an interesting point, Mark. And I'll to your point, I'll speak to this. When I got to Nazareth, I hadn't even played organized basketball yet. I learned how to play there. And then I don't know if y'all remember the year when James Clark and these guys came in through Nike One and through Brooklyn, USA. We got a bunch of those AAU kids. You get what I'm saying? And they were like seasoned kids that were been on a circuit, and I didn't even know what that was about because it didn't exist where I was at. We had tournaments, we had basketball tournaments in my neighborhood. We didn't have AAU programs in my neighborhood. Now, fast forward, you go up the street. There's an AAU program every block. I even coached the AAU program for CCC, the church that's right here on Flatlands Avenue. So everybody has one. There's one everywhere, and everybody's got a traveling team. So to your point, Mark, that could be a portion of this too. They are playing a lot of games, and as a coach, practice is very important. And even in football now, I'm finding kids are playing more games than practicing, and it's just bad. You're getting a bad product on the field. You
Well,
know,
what Dennis, just to your point, it's all across because it's like you look at baseball. Baseball's got the travel ball, and Mark, you know this, the rise of the Tommy John injuries, in baseball, and it's starting from a younger age, and like it goes back to basketball. You think about the whole 7-on-7, traveling football aspect
yeah.
as well. You have the travel.
OT7 is right now.
Yeah, you
OT7 is
listen. You have the traveling hockey. You have the juniors in hockey. It's all over because I had this conversation recently with a very good friend of mine, okay? And it's one of those where the adults in the room, and it starts from like high school, junior high, pee-wee days, they see the money aspect of it. Hence why these kids are playing, so many games, and it's like the wear and tear on their bodies. Listen, when we were coming up, I felt like, and y'all could jump in and tell me if you're wrong on this, the AAU travel ball, this, that, and the third for whatever sport, it was kind of like for the elite of the elite. Okay. Everybody else, you played on your high school team, you practiced, you got better, and then you might have a coach that comes to you and say, "Hey, Dennis, I want you to run for me on this squad. Hey, Mark, I want you to come play ball for me on this squad." Now all the days it's like the exact opposite. They're chasing that dollar and just trying to make a buck, and it's at the detriment of these kids in more ways than one. But
Yeah.
definitely, on the physical toll on the body. To your point, Mark.
And they're chasing a dollar both ways if you think about it, because now, to your point, before it was you had to be, on some type of level where you were recommended or scouted to be on this team. Now is if your parents can come up with whatever that entry fee is, there you go. You're on the team now. So they're getting the money from that side, and then they're getting the money from the other side with the sponsorships and different things like that.
Yeah.
So it's a detriment both ways there.
You know,
Yeah.
to both of you guys' point, Mark, when we were in high school, you
Hmm.
know, they had tryouts at the church. My best friend went, and we go down to the Gauchos tryouts. You know, this is legendary. Do y'all know who that starting five was? I'm gonna name them: Speedy Claxton, Eric Barkley, Wally Skurbiak, Elton Brand, and Lamar Odoms.
Right.
When we were in high school,
Yeah.
that was their starting five.
It's five
Right.
guys. It's five guys
I
made
don't
it to
even
the
think
NBA.
they're carrying that kind of heat at the church right now. But to what you guys are saying, this is what I experienced trying to go into something like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
That's who I went near saw. Imagine. What the fuck is this? I'm not good enough to play with these guys. I knew
Right.
that. You know, now everybody's got a team and it's literally for every single level. And like you're saying, Mark, I call it the universal money grab.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And to your point, going back to the shoe aspect, I think about it, for me in college, okay, I threw the shot put, and it's one of those where the company that outfitted our school, you know, they gave us some tremendous cross trainers, and I still feel like they were the most comfortable sneakers I ever had on in my life. But it's just like how times have changed because it was more about the performance. And like we made on a track and field team, we got different gear in comparison to maybe the basketball team, in comparison to maybe the baseball team, because it was geared more to your sport and what you had to do. And like I'm always to this day, I'm thankful, to my track coach, for some very great words of wisdom that she laid on me. And she told me, she was like, "Listen, big fella, you're a big guy. You have to change your footwear every couple of months. Why? Because of the wear and tear that you're going to put on your shoes, especially if you're out there running, doing this, that, and the third." And it's like it translates to what we're seeing right now in ball because it's like you just look at the sneakers, and even if you go to a sneaker store, you could just look at the sneakers. You could look at the grips on the bottom of those kicks. It's not like it was 25, 30 years ago. You know what I'm saying? Where it was like, you know what? You might go to a Foot Locker or wherever, get those kicks, and it'd be like, you know what? All right, I'm gonna get one pair to hoop in, and then I'm gonna go get one pair to ball in. You know what I'm saying? And it was just like because the sneakers had a different effect, and I think like the sneaker game aspect, has, taken off to a whole nother level. The quality of the sneakers is not the same. Listen, I'll tell you like this. I played in a pair of J's about 15 years ago, and the sole came out on me while I was playing. I was very fortunate that, nothing else happened there, and I had to, go, basically treat it, like a bum for a minute. I got a piece of tape and put it together and finish playing that game. But it's just like the quality is not there, and it's all around. And like going back to your point, man, it's a money grab from the other aspect. And before I flip it back to you guys, say what you want. The plumbers didn't have this problem. The only Achilles injury that I remember, and I'm sure there were others, but it wasn't as prominent as it is becoming. Because even remember a couple of years ago, we saw KD dealing with the calf injuries in the finals when he was with Golden State, tried to work through it. He blew out his Achilles, and of course, the rest is history. But nonetheless, the only Achilles injury I remember from back in the days was Isaiah Thomas, and this is towards the end of his time in the NBA with the Pistons, man. So things have changed, and I'll pose this question to y'all, and I'm flipping back over to y'all. Has the Achilles taken the place of the ACL when it comes to basketball, as far as being the big injury?
That's an interesting one. I think so. Like Jason Tatum and Kevin Durant both had their ACLs. I mean, their Achilles done at my hospital with the same guy. He's like the full-going expert, and the recovery time is much longer. You're seeing guys tear ACL and be out 4 or 5 months and come back before the next season. these people are gonna miss the entire next year. Everybody
Yeah.
that had one, they're not coming back. Probably maybe till maybe around you know March, maybe like right before the playoffs next year. If that, if they're coming back, it's at least a year, at least. It's a
Well,
very vigorous process. It's a big time tendon too. It's a much bigger piece of body tissue than an ACL. ACL is a ligament. That's a tendon.
yeah.
Tendon is a bigger, stronger, piece of equipment, for lack of a better term.
D
So 100%, it's much worse. I can tell you that right now. It's much
D
worse than the Achilles.
D to your point, Mark. I'm gonna flip it over to you in 1 second, man. Out of all three of those guys, I feel like the only guy that we're probably would most likely guaranteed to see next season is Dame, just due to the fact that his injury came so early in the playoffs. Tatum was in round two. I don't see the Celtics trying to push the narrative with Tatum next season due to the fact that, they pushed their chips to the middle of the table this year because they were trying to run it back. They had a legit chance to do it, prior to the Tatum injury, but you figure that additional tax apron, we've talked about it, how it was going to be a game changer. We've seen it already. Drew Holiday got traded, Porzingis got traded. So the Celtics are going to have a different look next year. I think it's going to be a play it by ear scenario. I still think they're a playoff team. I don't see them pushing the envelope. And with Halliburton, because it happened so late in the season, we're talking about last Sunday. So that was June 22nd. This is like a 9, 10 month injury. So honestly, unless, Halliburton got treated by Benjamin Button or something like that, I don't see him coming back at all next season for Indiana. You know what I'm saying? But I
Okay.
but I think Indiana's smart enough that, they have a deep enough team and they know how to draft and develop guys that they have guys in place. You're not going to replace Halliburton for what he can do because you saw that with the final 3 quarters of Game 7 against OKC. You can't really replace that guy, but they're going to go out there and give it a go. But yeah, man, it's so tough to come back from.
Yeah, those guys, like specifically Tatum and Halliburton, they shouldn't come back at all next year for the simple fact of it's going to be so late when they return. And now you're asking them to come off of that injury, pretty much off the street
Yeah,
to now play in playoff situation, playoff basketball, playoff speed game situations. Like that's one, unfair to your team
yeah,
for messing with the continuity that you built all season long.
right.
Two, it's gonna mess with, their ability to actually perform at a high level. And three, you risk re-injury or injuring something else on them for overcompensating. So I don't think that that's a good situation. Even in the Dame situation with his age as a
Yeah,
factor, I
yeah,
say maybe sit him out all year.
yeah.
But
Listen, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead, man. No, please
no, I
go
was
ahead.
just gonna say, yeah, I think the Achilles is definitely replacing the ACL as kind of that kind of kiss of death type of injury for, to put you out for a year, maybe a year and a half, because I think, and this is what I was gonna say, my second level of where I think this is going is I think it's even deeper than, the AAU and the over saturation of games. It's also the style of play. The style of play that is now known with basketball is kind of dangerous. And, I watched a video. Somebody sent me this video. It was real interesting. I'm gonna send it to both you guys. I just got it probably about 2 hours ago because I was talking with Breeze. Shout out to Breeze and his podcast. But we were talking about it. He sent me this video and it blew my mind. So basically, like from I had took like two or three screenshots from it. It was like from 83 to, let's see. No, it was 90 to 2023.
Hmm.
An Achilles happened 1.36 times per year. So basically, one person per year tore their Achilles.
Yeah,
It happened 7 times this past season already. And the crazy thing about it, that this video, it breaks down and it shows all 7 people. Um, it was Dame Lillard, Tatum, Wiseman, Isaiah Jackson, Drew Smith, and Halliburton. All of them, they all tore it while making the same move. And the name of the move is called a false step. And the video even broke down that when they're doing this move, the false step move, if they do it within an angle of less than 48 degrees with their ankle and knee, with that type of separation, it's almost impossible not to tear your Achilles while you're doing that move.
Wow.
So if you think about the style of play with everybody, kind of playing this way now, you making this kind of move, you're not really thinking, am I going 48 degrees or greater here? You're just thinking about making a move. So when you're doing that, you're popping that is crazy. 7 times over this year is unbelievable. And then also in this video, the last thing I want to point out, it really is crazy because Achilles, you're gonna rupture him in sports. It's gonna happen. But it gave a breakdown from 2012 till 2016 that basketball attributed to 47% of Achilles tears from high school, college, and professional sports from all other sports. And football's like 12%, tennis is like 13%. You got racquetball, squash, soccer, volleyball, like list goes on and on with the different things. But 47% of that's from basketball. So I think the style of play is another huge factor into what's going on.
Now, Mark, of those Achilles injuries, I don't know, like I just throwing it out there asking, do you know how many of those were at the offensive end of the court as opposed to the defensive end of the court?
No, it doesn't say, but in the video, as far as the NBA, the seven from the NBA, it looks like 5 of them were on the offensive end and 2 on the defensive end. Because I took a screenshot of the 7 instances. It looked like Wiseman was backpedaling on defense,
Hmm.
and it looks like Isaiah Jackson was getting picked or trying to get around a pick.
Okay.
But the others all basically had the ball in their hand and they were trying to do something, trying to make a move.
So let's
Okay.
talk about this false step. So even if you go back and just watch Halliburton, he shot faked, and then before he went forward, he took a step back to push forward.
Hmm.
So and this is something that even when I was coaching kids and training basketball players,
Hmm.
I would try and remove that because you're really going backwards to go forward. Even
Right.
like when you coach running backs, you don't want any movement that's less than forward.
Right.
So, even what you're saying is like if you go back and watch them, so Halliburton shot faked, right? Then
Hmm.
put his foot behind him to go
Hmm.
forward. If he would have just shot faked and went forward, and it's a drill I used to do when I was training kids still, I would have you shot fake, right? And then you won't come up. And then I just have you take a step forward. You would just remove. Now think about what I'm saying to y'all. I'm
Hmm.
not going to do anything. I get you into your shot motion. You're gonna bend your knees like you're about to shoot, but you don't come up. You shot fake from the same area, and then you step forward. I got that from Headache. They used to play N1. He played for me on one of my guys, and I met him, and we started talking about basketball. And he said, incorporate this drill with all your guards. So I made sure that you would never go backwards when you were shot faking to go forward. You would push off from that point. But you go back and watch Halliburton specifically. I know exactly what you're talking about. He took a big step behind him, Mark.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that
Huge. His foot was way behind him.
and that
Yeah, and
and
think about it. If you're doing this, if it's just like a second nature to do this move that you've been doing it for years, and if the video is correct or accurate, where it's saying if you're doing it at a less than a 48-degree angle from your knee to your ankle, it's almost inevitable for you to pop your Achilles. Who the hell has really got the presence of mind to know I'm doing this at a 50-degree angle, or I'm doing this at a 30-degree angle, or whatever?
and that's a staple of his game because if you go back to that game winner that he hit on the Knicks in the conference finals, I think it was game one.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's basically what he did. The step back, and to your point, Mark, you talked about how the game has changed, and it's like it's one of those where we have 30 teams in the NBA right now, all playing the same brand of basketball, and it's getting up and down the court. Whereas 30, maybe 35 years ago, you might have had, the Golden State Warriors at that time with Don Nelson as their coach, who were the teams that were running and gunning, or like the Lakers from a couple of generations ago with Paul Westhead, and I think about, even when Paul Westhead, I think he was at Loyola Marymount when they had Bo Kimball and the late
Hank
Hank
Gathers.
Gathers. Right.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? They had that style. But, most of these teams right now, they can't run a half court offense to save their lives. And it's just like it's basically everybody trying to do the same thing. And I look at it, you know, the game of basketball has changed. We've just talked about, the conditioning aspect of it as well. Also, once the Halliburton injury happened, a lot of people, were chiming in as far as this, that, and the third, on social media. And, you heard people complaining because of the amount of time that Indiana had off and Indiana OKC had off between game 6 and game 7, and like, oh, the need to stretch out the playoffs even more. I don't think that was an issue because, I think back to 80s basketball. I think back to 90s basketball. I even think back to 2000s basketball. Okay, you had one game, one day off between playoff games. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, of course, most of these kids nowadays, they don't play 82 games in the regular season as well. They for the most part, they're beefing about, the 65 game minimum requirement in order to qualify for postseason awards. So, I also wonder if, not playing as many games, what I'm saying, factors into that. I know, Mark, you talked about it from a younger aspect, when kids are playing high school ball, you ball, they're playing multiple times a day, this, that, and the third. But I also wonder about the conditioning aspect when they get to the pros because you basically, with the exception of maybe like a Nikola Jokic, okay, regardless if it's a point guard or a big man in the NBA right now, everybody's got the same body type, man. You know what I'm saying? Like they all have the same look, regardless of position. Everybody's about 220 pounds, whether they're 6 feet tall or whether they're 7 feet tall. So I just wonder if all of those things factor in as well, man.
I
Yeah.
mean, I wouldn't even know where to start with that. Like maybe this is something, a question we get answered later on down the line as we just continue watching the games and watching the sport just, evolve and devolve. Speaking about the change in the game, I got my son's game on. It just all happened under Mike D'Antoni when he got Nash and they paired him with Stoudemire. And this is what started what we watched today. And
Hmm.
it's funny because he didn't really coach anybody to play defense. And then the Golden State Warriors figured out, oh, we could play like this and play defense. We got a dynasty. It's crazy, to watch it from my perspective because I got to see it in its infancy, and I was just like, what are we doing? You mean to tell me we're just gonna shoot threes all day? And it's weird, And then look at fast forward now, the leading scorer in the NBA this season is a 2 point scorer. So we
Yeah.
might we might see it go the opposite way.
It might change up, but I'd still think like, style of play is a huge thing. And, like I really think that the game, they kind of, I don't know, like, and this is crazy that I'm even say this because Ace Bailey kind of inspired me to say this, but they're trying to 2K real life now. Like how Ace Bailey thought that, he could sway the team that could pick him based on this and that. Like he seriously came out and said like he thought it was like 2K where he could do that. And I think that the kids are like now playing ball like it's 2K and they want to do more of the flashy stuff. So, Will, you made a point earlier where you said, the plumbers weren't tearing their Achilles. And that's because the plumbers had that old school plumbers game. Wasn't nobody really trying to do flashy stuff. And ironically, the first person that really was doing some of the most flashy stuff is Isaiah, the one that you said did tear an Achilles. So if
Right.
you really think about it, it's crazy. It's the style of game. And I think that's why when everybody is now wanting to go to more of that 2K flashy style of game, you're going to see way more of these kind of injuries happening
Yeah.
because you don't have those real back to the basket bigs anymore.
No.
You got your flashy kind of bigs. So It's more susceptible for them to tear Achilles. Whereas before, you would probably only see it in guards. Now
Mm-hmm.
it's fair game across all five positions for that
Bro,
injury to happen.
But
bro. So go
that
ahead, go ahead, D. Go ahead, D.
that's because this is the highlight era, Mark.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, a drop step, ain't gonna make it on nobody's highlight reel. But if you cross somebody up and you know, do you gotta do all these ridiculous moves, and everybody's got a God's game. To your point. And look, it's funny as a basketball coach, I don't have a problem with that. I think God skills are universal. You can't even necessarily call them God skills anymore.
Right.
But you know, it's really we really splitting hairs here. I think it's a combination of a lot of different things, and maybe we're just in a weird space where this is going to happen. Maybe this all dies out in a few years.
Well, I mean,
I don't think it continues along this way.
well,
Number one. Number two, what you're going to see is when these guys get these calf strains, they're going to sit the fuck down. I said it to a group of kids that I'm in a group chat with that he's going to tear his Achilles if he keeps playing. I saw
Hmm.
Perkins say it on TV. I'm
Hmm.
sure somebody told Tyrese Halliburton, hey, listen, this tight calf, you might need to sit out. But then
Yeah.
every time he interviewed, he said, I'm playing. I said, okay, I get where he's coming from.
It's the finals. I can't be mad at him for that.
well, I mean, Lion, listen, trust me, I totally agree with everything both of you just said. I mean, to Halliburton's point, I guess, and we've all been through this. You get an injury, you're a little tentative at first, but once you get your sea legs going, you kind of feel all right. He came back in Game 6. They didn't have to tax him because they beat the brakes off of OKC in that game. I think he played like 25 or 26 minutes.
23.
Right. So in his mind, he was probably like, okay, you know what? I got a game under my belt, and listen, it's all on the line. I'm good to go. Because remember, when Game 7 started, he was cooking, and I'm saying to
Mhm.
myself, and I'm like, okay, they better buckle up because this is going to be a long night. Because Halliburton, to his credit, he's not a star player that is afraid of the big moment, because you have guys that want to call themselves a star or a superstar out there, but they shy from the spotlight when the game is on the line. Halliburton has shown he's not that guy. And it's one of those, listen, it's truly unfortunate that he got hurt because I picked Indiana to win that series and I said 7. And I'm gonna stick to it and say, you know what? If he didn't get hurt, they more than likely win that series. But we can't play the woulda, coulda, shoulda game. However, you know what? The guy went out on the shield, okay, and it was truly unfortunate that what happened. And he even said himself, "Listen, if he had to do it all over again, nothing would have changed, man." But it's like again, man. For me, one of the biggest things is the shoes. Different era, different time, different position. But I think about Karl Malone out there playing in catapults. I think about Akeem Olajuwon out there. I think he was playing like in Spaldings, and then
Tonics, I think he used to wear.
right, and then
Yeah.
I even remember when Derek Coleman was with the New Jersey Nets, and he had a deal with British Knights. I don't even know if that sneaker company is around anymore. Okay, and these guys went out there and hoop, but at the end of the day, they still gave you like, a better quality, base of a shoe than like the name brand sneakers are giving you nowadays. Listen, I mean, it was even back in the days when we were growing up. Okay, we may not have always gotten the name brand shoes, but still, the shoes that we got, I feel like they had a better base, to run and play and do things like that than the quality, the top name companies for the most part are putting out there. I feel like these sneakers nowadays are more made for fashion than they are, to go out there and hoop in. It's like, listen, back in the days, we all probably did it once or twice where, we played in some Timbs and, our feet were killing us after that. And for me, I think the biggest thing I did in that aspect, I'll never do it again. I was a kid at the time. I called myself playing ball one day in church clothes. All right. And to church clothes to the point that I had a pair of Stacy Adams on.
Oh
My
man.
listen, I got the blister of all blisters. on my feet after that, man. Listen, but again, it just goes back to what you need to have, on your feet. And it's just like your feet are so important to your body as an athlete because as your feet go, your legs go. As your legs go, your knees go, and it goes up to your back and so forth. So I really do feel, and I cannot harp on this enough. I know there's people out there who feel like, well, I play in low tops and I'm okay. Listen, it gives you better. I feel like the high tops give you better foot support. They give you better ankle support. I'm just biased to it. That's just how I feel about it. But nonetheless, I really do think the shoes do play a factor in it. I know that recently NBA Commissioner Adam Silver has talked about the NBA using AI to try to get ahead of this thing. AI is okay, but it's kind of like a common sense thing. It's like me sitting back and watching baseball, and people are like, "Well, why are all of these? Why is there a rise in Tommy John and injuries, surgeries?" And like Tommy John is kind of like Achilles right now in baseball or basketball rather. And to me, I'm like, well, listen, you don't need AI to figure that out if you've got every pitcher out there in baseball trying to throw 100 miles an hour, everybody's not equipped to throw 100 miles an hour. So, of course, you're going to sit up there and have problems with guys blowing out their arms. And I feel like the same way, everybody is not equipped to play on the perimeter. Okay. Everybody, and like in the current NBA, and again, everybody's body structure is different. You need to do something about the footwear, you need to do something about the conditioning. Um, again, like everybody basically has the same body type. It's like I look at the NBA right now, and I don't want to go out like act like I'm going off on a tangent, but you remember playing NBA Live back in the days, and you go to that creator player mode, and basically once you start off, it's that generic player, 6'5", 200 pounds, no muscles, whatever like that. That's basically what we're getting right now from everybody, or like 80% of the guys across the league.
Well,
Well,
I want to go
again,
back real
it,
quick. I'm gonna be quick, Mark. I want y'all guys to go back and watch that first 5 minutes of Game 7. If you pay attention, Halliburton was never putting his toes down. He was coming down on his heel. And the reason why he ended up shooting all those threes is because he knew he couldn't move. Just go back and look at it. I
hmm
played games where I couldn't move. And the minute I got open, I just shot it. He just happened to make those.
hmm
He couldn't
Um,
move. If you go back and look, and then go back and watch him on defense, how he's moving, where he's at on his rotation. He missed 2 rotations.
Yeah,
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 So
no,
go back and watch. He was not moving. When he tried to move,
yeah.
injury.
yeah. My third point in all of this too, where I think all of this is coming from, because like I said at the beginning, I had three parts. I think is and D, you kind of touched on it a little bit earlier with the calf strains. It's they're not doing the things that they need to do and paying attention to the little injuries and taking them as serious as they need to. Like we've already seen from as far back as when Kobe tore his Achilles, he had a calf strain first. It's always a calf strain first, and
Same
then it's
thing.
the Achilles.
Same thing with
And
KD when in
yeah,
the
same
finals.
thing with KD. Like so I don't think that they're taking this injury serious enough because if you think about it, these guys are getting these calf strains and in regular season situations, not even, like I said, Halliburton, total different situation. It's the finals. I don't blame him for that.
Right.
But let's say we're talking, you know, mid-January, a game in mid-January where a dude gets a calf strain. And then they go ahead and say, all right, well, he's going to be out probably 10 to 14 days. And then 14 days later, he's back out there on the court. I don't think that that's enough time. I think each situation is going to be different and they need to really study and investigate. If they want to talk about using AI for something, I don't know how you use AI for this, but they really need to investigate and study the severity of these different levels of calf strains and really assess how long a person needs to be out, how much conditioning and rehab, how much massaging, how much hot tub, cold tub, all those different things like that that they need for each one of these different things because you can't treat them all the same because they're treating them all the same and now you're getting this rise in people popping their Achilles. So they've really got to do, I think that's the final piece, I think, is to really study the calf strain relationship to the Achilles and understand. what to do. So like I think about this, right? My left knee, I've torn ligaments in it before time and time again. Had them repaired. My left Achilles will bother me from time to time depending on when my calf gets a little tight. And it could be from me being active. It could be from me shooting some hoops. It could be from me just, I just finished doing a lot of movement and stuff. So like lifting and doing things like that. And I noticed that. Like they really need to, we know it's a relationship there. They really need to investigate, spend the time and the finances on the direct correlation of it and exactly what they can do to get ahead of it. And I think if they can do that, then they can curtail the rise that we're seeing. But until they do that, it's going to continue to get worse because the first two things, the over usage of these players at a young age and the style of the game that is today, are going to lead to this just being through the roof.
And like Mark, just to piggyback off of what you said, the overusage of the players at an early age and the overusage of the players when they come back from these injuries. Because the thing is, it's like if you have a calf injury, if you have a hamstring injury, you got to be very careful with that. So instead of trying to get 35 minutes from a guy on the court that night, maybe you got to say, you know what? Let's keep him to 15. You know what I'm saying? Let's allow him to ease back into that injury or back ease back in from that injury. I always think about, the year that Derrick Rose, blew out his knee with Chicago, and Derrick Rose, of course, we know was never the same guy. What always got glossed over that season was, if you remember, late in that year, Derrick Rose had a hamstring injury. Okay. Derrick Rose's first game back was a road game for the Bulls on Sunday afternoon at the Garden against the Knicks. That game went to overtime and the Bulls lost the game. Derrick Rose played about 45 minutes, and I'm asking myself, Tom Thibodeau, what are you doing? That was his first game back. You know, D Rose probably needed to see the court for like 15, 20 minutes and say, you know what? Win or lose, we got to give somebody else an opportunity to see, something what they can do because, Derrick Rose is too vital. He's coming back from this injury. Let's ease him back into it. You can't come back from injuries like that and go full speed. I'll switch gears for a minute to football. And, a lot of players in the NFL have complained. And now they're basically going along with it as far as the quick turnaround from playing a Sunday game to playing a Thursday night game. And I remember it's like I don't remember how many years ago it was, but Earl Thomas, the safety for the Seahawks at the time, hurt his calf on a Sunday night. Okay, and I think Richard Sherman actually spoke out about this. I think Richard Sherman was still playing for Seattle at the time. They turned around, had a Thursday night game against the Cardinals. Earl Thomas blew out his Achilles. And it's like, it's one of those where more than likely, had that have been a Sunday game, we're probably talking about a fresh Earl Thomas, going out there and and being able to play. And the way Earl Thomas played free safety, Earl Thomas was all over the field, cutting, shifting, and things like that. So again, you just have to wonder about those things. But for me, I just look at it and I just say, there's so many different factors into this thing. There's so many different layers. And I feel like AI maybe can help you, but at the end of the day, I think everybody that's involved in the NBA just needs to use common sense. And I'll tell you like this, they're going to try to get ahead of this thing because the three guys that we just mentioned, these all-star players, we're talking about roughly $150 million in salary that's going to be on the sidelines next year. These owners are not going to sit up there and continue to shell out that type of money to players, to like their bread and butter, if you will, to be, in street clothes and be cheerleaders. So I think they're going to try to get ahead of this somewhat. I don't know if they're going to be able to fully get ahead of it, but they're darn sure going to try.
Didn't Tatum have like a little calf something in a game or two before that happened? I'm
Yes,
pretty sure I remember that.
yes,
He might have.
yes, yes. I don't think there's anyone that tore their Achilles that didn't have a calf string first.
Yeah. they gotta sit these guys down. Like if the protocol right now is 10 to 14 days, honestly, they gotta start sitting these guys down a month.
Well, listen, I'll tell you like this. I think with the three injuries that just happened in the postseason, especially with Tatum and Halliburton, and we know about the load management factor in the NBA, there's gonna be more guys that they're just like, you know what, screw it, I'm sitting out. You know what I'm saying?
You don't want to tear your Achilles, man. It's like one of the worst injuries
Yeah.
for an athlete.
Yeah.
So, you don't want to do that. I mean, before everybody thought the ACL was a kiss of death, they've gotten so good with doing ACL surgeries. My hospital, they can send you home the same day, William.
Well,
You
listen,
go home the same day. They bring you in the morning, 8 o'clock. You home before dinner.
I mean, I remember once upon a time, the ACL injury for any sport, that was it. And I think, what we saw from Adrian Peterson the year after he tore his ACL and MCL, and he came back, and I think he needed like 8 or 9 yards to surpass Eric Dickerson for the single season rushing record that year with the Vikings and stuff like that. And like to your point, it's like, the technology has changed for that. But I like they got to get ahead of this thing because it's like there's a lot of it's not even like it's role players that we're talking about. We're talking about prominent players, players that are vital to their teams, players that people want to see go out there and hoop, man. And it's like it's changed the narrative, for all of these teams in the play in the off season as well because Indiana, they drafted Cam Jones out of Marquette. Okay, and they also signed Stephen Ashworth as an undrafted free agent, the kid out of Creighton who started at Utah State. I feel like those moves right there were like, you know what? Listen, we need ourselves more ball handlers because we're not going to have
Mhm.
Halliburton next year, and of course, that means T.J. McConnell's going to get more run at the point. That means Nimhard's going to get more run, being a floor general for them. I feel like I think with the Celtics, either way, they were going to cut costs because the thing was, it was a shrewd move by Wick Grousbeck to put that team on the market when he did because there was a hefty salary tax payment that was coming for Boston. They got under that second apron by trading Porzingis and Drew Holiday, but nonetheless, I feel like it's also changed the aspect of what Milwaukee is trying to do this offseason because, of course, you hear the reports that, Giannis, and I don't know how true it is or not, about Giannis sitting back waiting to see what the Bucks are going to do. But clearly, a lot of what the Bucks wanted to do was with Giannis and Dame. And now, of course, you're probably not going to have Dame next year. And to your point, Mark, with Dame's age, they might be a little uh less reluctant to have him go out there, especially not just with Dame's injury, but also, seeing Tatum and Halliburton getting hurt in the playoffs after him, man. So
How old is Dame?
Dame's is like in his mid 30s, you
Yeah, I
know.
think he's like 32, 34, somewhere in that range now.
Because even
Yeah,
even bringing up TJ McConnell, TJ McConnell's 33, he's gonna be 34.
right. But the thing is, McConnell's never had the injury. But then like you
Right.
figure both of those guys, like I know for a fact McConnell's a 4 year guy in college. I think Dame played
Right.
at least 3 years at
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Weaver State. So the age factor as well. But the thing is, it's like I
Could you
feel
see
like
them bringing in Chris Paul?
Milwaukee.
Hmm.
I don't see it happening because
I
you ain't
Oh,
got.
he
forgot
said he
where he
wants to
was
play
going
near
to.
LA. So
But I mean, I heard he wants to play close to LA, but also, I mean, like him and Doc, from their time together with the Clippers, I don't think Chris Paul wants to go back down that road again.
I
yeah.
heard I heard Dallas was a possible landing spot for him to kind of hold it down until Kyrie gets back.
Dallas is a possible landing spot, and honestly, he might mess around and stay in San Antonio as well, because they might bring him back, to work with that young team again. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And it's like, Chris Paul at this point in his career, he's probably going to be, a little, he's definitely going to be much cheaper than he was in the prime of his career. So, I mean, there's a lot of factors in there. I mean, I think Chris Paul realizes at this point he's not going to get the ring. You know what I mean? And that's fine because I think he's still a tremendous player. But nonetheless, I don't see him going out there to a Milwaukee. I think in the case of Indiana, because the money that Indiana's committed to Halliburton, because Halliburton's getting a little bit more than 50 million next season, and they're also paying Pascal Siakam, and Indiana. I think they pride themselves on the fact that I think it's been about 20 years that they've been over the luxury tax. And of course, as a smaller market franchise, you definitely want to avoid the luxury tax. So in their case, Indiana, it's always been about drafting and developing their
Mhm.
talent. So I just feel like the Halliburton injury, really, altered, their structure as far as their game plan for what they were going to do in the off season. So that's why I think that the NBA is going to try their hardest to get ahead of this thing. And maybe, again, maybe you got to sit down with these shoe companies, and it's just like, listen, we need a better product out there as far as like the footwear that these guys are wearing.
Yeah, maybe even they figure something out in, you know, like Steph situation. So I look at him, right? So
With the ankles,
the
with the
ankles
ankles.
all the time, all the time, all the time. And what did he finally do? He got those guards. He started
Yeah.
wearing those guards constantly, and
Hmm.
since then he really hasn't had any of those situations. Maybe it's something you need to come up with some type of new equipment because, you know, something needs to be done.
Listen, I think about a guy like Reggie Miller. Reggie Miller always played in high tops throughout his career, but towards the second half of Reggie's career. I think about the Larry Bird, Rick Carlisle days when they were coaching him in Indiana. Yeah, Reggie had high tops, but Reggie also had ankle braces. On under those under those sneakers as well, man. And it's just like you have to, you got to protect yourself as much as possible on the athletic field. I mean, I don't know, from a standpoint because a lot of guys nowadays they wear the leg sleeves under the shorts and stuff like that. I'm just curious to know how many guys in the NBA actually get their ankles taped before they go out there and hoop. Because that once upon a time was a staple in the NBA as well. So I'm just curious to know all of that because I don't know like if any of you guys ever had your ankles or your feet taped for to play ball or play any sport, but I can tell you from personal experience it gives you much more stability. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And the ankle braces do as well. The ankle braces, I feel like, are even better than getting your feet taped up because it's like, you have for most of them, you have that Velcro strap that comes over. You could tie them up as well. So you could, because of that, you can always go out there and make adjustments, to protect your feet and stuff like that. It's a lot of different things that, guys I really think got to work at. And I think it's got to be a collective issue from the league. And I really do think, and I'm not trying to sound like a broken record here, but I do think that the league is really going to roll up their sleeves on this stuff because at the end of the day, these owners, I don't see them wanting to consistently, pay guys $50 million or so to have them sit on the bench. You think about it. You look at the money that quarterbacks are being paid right now in the National Football League. And what does that coincide with? The rules for how you can contact the quarterback have changed because some of these quarterbacks in the NFL right now, the going rate is basically $40 million on the cheap. Some of these guys are getting $60 million by the time that the next CBA comes around, probably talking about like 70, 75 million. These owners don't want to sit up there and pay a quarterback that type of money to say, you know what, he's out for like 6 to 8 weeks because he injured his shoulder after getting hit in the pocket, or he's out for like 4 to 6 weeks, after suffering a concussion. Of course, in the case of Tom Brady that year with the Patriots, when Bernard Pollard hit him, he's out for the year because of an ACL injury because a guy hit him low. So, I think at the end of the day, there's going to be, a collective work by the NBA to try to get ahead of this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think for real though, it's gotta be conditioning more than anything because anytime it's a soft tissue injury, non-contact injury, that type of thing, That's conditioning. And, and on every level, they're putting competition before condition.
Yeah,
And the narrative's got to change. And until that narrative change, unfortunately, we're going to keep seeing this on every different level, because we're just highlighting what we're seeing on the NBA level.
yeah,
There's been a tremendous amount of high school and college Achilles injuries also. So,
yeah.
like it's gotta start from day one. They gotta put the emphasis on conditioning more. It's gotta be more massaging. It's gotta be more, in the weight room, stretching, doing things like that before you actually are worried about just going out there and playing ball, man.
Listen. I remember about 20 years ago, maybe, yeah, give or take. I played a pickup game with some guys, and one of the guys, he played ball, at my school, in my college, and I looked at him and I was like, "Yo, bro, you don't want to just warm up like a little bit." He's like, nah, like screw this, let's go. And I'm like, you might be able to get away with that in your early 20s, but it's just like as you get older, it progresses. And I think, and that's just from our standpoint, but like as a pro athlete standpoint, the conditioning, both pre and post game, is so important. And it's just like, the practice reps, the conditioning that you do on your own. It's just like all of that, factors in. I think about a super athlete like a Jerry Rice. Throughout Jerry Rice's career, the only severe injury that Jerry Rice had was when he tore his ACL. And it wasn't because of a lack of conditioning or anything like that. He got horse collar tackled by Warren Sapp. You know what I'm saying? But Jerry Rice was so supremely conditioned that he had other world class athletes tell him, you know what, I can't hang with you. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? And it's just like that, like to your point, Mark, the conditioning is a factor.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And that's why certain people like Jerry Rice, people would always want to go and train with him. There's a reason why.
Yeah,
Hakeem Olajuwon, there's a reason why people always want to go train with him and learn, his moves, his footwork, like
yeah.
things that people have specialties with,
Hmm.
they need to lean on that. And the NBA seriously needs to go out there and revamp their whole conditioning department and find people who are really well equipped in dealing with calf and Achilles injuries.
Oh, listen, big time, man. And I think back to the strength coach, that, ran things when I was in college. RIP to him. Very great man, very inspirational, for my life. Okay. And he always focused on the lower body, for every single sport. One of the first things he always had guys do if they came to the weight room, let's go squat. And it wasn't just the squat workouts, it was your other workouts, your hamstring curls, working your quadriceps, doing the plyometrics, doing the agility drills. And, it kind of correlates to what I'm about, like to like what we're talking about. I had a friend of mine, very good friend of mine. He always talked about needing to put more of an emphasis on your hamstrings when you're training. Just due to the fact that we naturally use our quadriceps more than our hamstrings. If you're going up a flight of stairs, it's more on the quads. If you're walking or squatting, it's more on the quads. Whatever. You know what I'm saying? And it's just like the little nuances, I think, sometimes are, looked over. And I think it's being looked over in a big way right now in sports. It's kind of like you can take a nice steak, and I don't know about y'all, but like steak is one of my favorite meats to have, okay? And if you don't if you're not patient enough, especially with a thicker piece of steak, if you're not patient enough when it cooks and you don't season that bad boy properly, you're just going to go out there and waste a nice piece of meat. And it's kind of like the same thing. It's like you have to do the little things that everybody doesn't want to do
Hmm.
to be out there. You got to do the little things, to keep yourself ready to go. And I feel like, like to your point, Mark, a lot of people are looking over those little things. And it starts with your off-season conditioning, you name it, man. And I think that's got to be a big factor.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And if they don't tighten up and figure out a way how to get ahead of this sooner than later, we're going to see this continue. And if this trend continues, it's going to not only hurt the product that we see on the court
Hmm.
because guys are going to be more reticent and hesitant to do things. But, it's also going to hurt the game itself because now you're going to your point, like you said, have owners saying, I'm paying a guy $50 million to sit on the bench. I was looking at something, during the draft where they were saying, like, with Cooper Flag, like, with this contract, and like if he does what, everybody is saying that he probably is going to do, and he hits like his super maxes on his next two contracts, he would have earned $930 million by the time he's 31 years old.
Yeah.
There's
I'm a,
no way that an Achilles injury right there doesn't derail that in major ways, like
yeah.
not just talking about the product that he's going to produce on the court. And not to say he is going to get hurt, but let's just say what if, like, we're talking $930 million that now hangs in the balance one way or the other of him either getting it or not. The owner is paying this money out there for a player who possibly may miss a season and a half.
Hmm.
The ramifications that this holds on so many levels, they have to do something before it gets worse. And hopefully this season is that shining light, like the bat signal going in the air saying,
Yeah.
hey, we got to figure this out. Because like I said, that statistic from 90 to 23. So we're talking a large, sample size here.
Hmm.
One person basically a year is tearing Achilles, and now all of a sudden seven happens this year.
Yeah. Yeah. Listen, that's a big jump, man. That's a big
Yeah.
jump. And then, also to the point, I feel like some of these guys that come in the league now at age 19 or 20, their body looks the same at age 30 that it did in age 20. And like you look at a guy like LeBron's body, doesn't look the same now that it did when he first came into the league. I mean, he looks like, a specimen. You know what I'm saying? Even Kobe, I know Kobe had the Achilles injury late in his career, which, I factor in for the sneakers and also the wear and tear on his body at that point as a possibility. But Kobe's body didn't look the same, you know, in comparison to when he first came into the league. A guy like Russell Westbrook, I mean, Westbrook, put on some muscle. You could see it throughout his career, in comparison to when he first, came to the league out of UCLA and things like that. So a lot of that.
Giannis is the poster child for that.
Oh, listen,
For the
Giannis,
transformation.
Giannis was like a skinny,
Yeah,
punk kid, and it's like you look at Giannis now, Giannis is like chiseled out of granite, like no pun intended, but Giannis
right,
looks like a Greek god.
right,
You know what I mean?
right.
So it's like, yo, the conditioning aspect of it matters. It truly does. So I just feel like it's got to be a collective work by everybody involved to get ahead of this thing.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And it starts with, I think, like I said originally, it starts with the coaches at a younger age,
Hmm.
and it has to go from there. But the only way that I think that even happens if the NBA kind of starts a movement, so to speak, where it just trickles down. And it can't go obviously from NBA to AAU overnight. It's got to
No.
go from NBA to college, from college to high school, and then from high school to AAU. It's got to trickle down like that to where, we're doing this for the greater good of everything of the game, not just this one particular AAU program or this one particular high school program or this one particular college program. Like, and that's where things I think could get real super dicey because, we're in a situation where we live in a selfish society, unfortunately, where, everybody's out for themselves. And, this AAU coach or this high school coach who's got this kid right now, and, he's got him for a year or two, maybe. And he's looking at elevating his stature in the game, by riding this kid's coattail, so to speak, to, hey, if I know you're gonna go out there and give me 30, 12 rebounds, 8 assists, 2 steals, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and play you even if you got a calf strain or maybe you shouldn't play that night. Like that's the dicey situation that I don't know. I don't know if there is a fix to, honestly.
Nah, there isn't because the thing is like we've opened up Pandora's box and Pandora's box is the money. You know what I'm saying? Because it's like, you look at the money from the standpoint of the high school AAU circuit, right now, and I'm not just going to put it on the players. I'm not just going to put it on the coaches. I also put it, in some cases on the parents, behind these kids as well. You know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of different layers to it. So like I don't know how the NBA is going to get ahead of it, but I definitely see them rolling up their sleeves and giving it the old college try, so to speak, to try to somewhat get ahead of it.
I think one thing that they could do to actually help on their level is, like I said before about the calf strain. If a calf strain happens, that I think the NBA needs to kind of step in a little bit more with their doctors, so to speak, and say, okay, well, you're evaluating this guy to be out for 10 or 14 days. All right,
Hmm.
well, when that period is up and you're thinking about possibly returning him to practice or returning him to the lineup, I think now our doctors need to kind of come in and consult and see what's going on because
It
maybe he needs a little bit more time. Like that's the only thing that they maybe could govern. But then again, another dicey situation that may come in between the players union and the NBA is that in the CBA where something is like that is even allowed. That I don't know.
it might have to be a scenario kind of like in the NFL with the whole concussion protocol now,
Yeah,
where like basically it's got to be an independent doctor as well,
yeah,
to kind of go through and get ahead of this thing. Uh, Listen, it's a lot of different avenues, that you got to go through to try to figure this thing out, man. It's a lot.
definitely, man.
Definitely, man. But listen, I mean, we covered a lot on this topic tonight. And, for those folks who have an opportunity to check this out, I hope that you like what you heard and saw. And I hope that, you're more than welcome to, drop some comments as far as what you heard and saw. Mark, your background looks a lot different, from the last
Yeah,
time
yeah.
that you and I talked. So hopefully the next time I see you, man, you got your title belt back up there, man.
Oh yeah, man. Right now, this is the makeshift. This isn't even so I didn't even get a chance to finish the studio.
Hmm.
Long, dude, moving in, trying to get this house together. It's a process.
Yeah,
I'm actually camped out in the basement right now, man.
yeah.
Next time I definitely will have it up. Didn't get the carpet cleaned all the way like I needed
Hmm.
it to, and that caused a delay. I was in the living room all afternoon putting together stuff for the walls and furniture and all. Oh man, it's a process, man.
No, listen, I know because I think about from the last time that I moved, and I remember my wife saying, "Listen, we don't have a lot of space in here," and I'm like, "We don't have a lot of space in here because we have a lot of boxes right now." But once we got to the point where we were chopping away at the boxes, and I told her, I said, sat her down, I was like, "Look at the amount of space we got."
Right.
Now, so it's like, it's a process, man. But as always, man, I'm glad to have you on here, man.
Thanks, bro. Definitely, man. Next time I'll definitely have the full setup ready to roll. Yeah, man. It's been a crazy 2 or 3 weeks for sure.
D, as always, man, it's a pleasure to have you on here, man. And like, I appreciate what you were able to give the folks from an aspect because not only Dennis dropped off for a moment there, but I'll definitely give him his flowers nonetheless from the standpoint that we all play sports, but Dennis coach sports as well, and he does coach sports, so it's like an aspect of him seeing it from both sides of the coin there, you know what I'm saying? So as always, shout out to Dennis, for what, he brings to the platform. And for everybody, if you like what you heard and saw on this podcast, you know what to do. Hit that like button as well as subscribing to this channel. Like I always say, it's greatly appreciated. If you're on the X, you can check me out at 300 pounds of sports. And of course, the X was formerly known as Twitter. You give me that follow, I'll give you that follow right back. And the same can be said for Instagram. You can check me out at 300 pounds of sports knowledge. You can also check us out. And when I say us, Mark Jenkins is on there as well on Facebook at the Sports Depot 365. And Mark will probably co-sign with what I'm about to say as far as I'm concerned. One of the better sports debating groups on social media. So definitely, if you know you're on Facebook, definitely check it out. But until next time, fine folks, my name is William Martin for Mark Jenkins, and the recently, not going to say departed, but, for Dennis Ward, we are signing off and saying thanks once again for checking out the 300 Pounds of Sports Knowledge podcast here on YouTube. Be well, everybody.